My name is Mara Ellison, and the night before my wedding, my future mother-in-law called me a gold digger in front of 58 guests. Then she placed a pen beside my plate and ordered me to sign away everything I owned. She expected tears. Her daughter had already raised her phone ready to record my humiliation. My fiancé sat frozen beside me, and the people filling the private dining room at the North Shore Club watched with the quiet excitement of an audience waiting for the curtain to rise. I picked up the pen. For one satisfied second, Lydia Whitmore believed she had won. What she did not know was that I had brought a folder of my own. She also did not know that the woman she considered poor could have paid every debt attached to the Whitmore name without selling a single truck. To understand why I had allowed her to underestimate me for almost 2 years, you need to understand the woman who raised me. My grandmother, June, cleaned offices at night in Duluth, Minnesota. She came home smelling of lemon disinfectant and winter air, with swollen fingers and a dented green lunchbox under her arm. With both my parents gone, Grandma June became my entire family. We lived in a narrow rented house where the pipes complained every January. We did not have much, but she never spoke like a poor woman. Whenever I felt ashamed of our second-hand furniture or the patches on my coat, she tapped that lunchbox and said, "What feeds you matters more than what impresses strangers." After she died, the lunchbox was the only thing of hers I kept with me every day. I was 22 when I used my savings and a small bank loan to buy a battered pickup, 2 lawnmowers and an old snowplow. I called the company Harbor Outdoor Services. In summer, I cut grass and repaired neglected properties. In winter, I cleared parking lots before dawn. For the first year, I answered business calls from the truck because I could not afford an office. 15 years later, Harbor had 63 vehicles, more than 100 employees, and major municipal and commercial contracts. It was valued at just over $21 million. I also owned 3 commercial buildings and a substantial investment portfolio. Almost nobody outside the business knew. I still drove an 11-year-old pickup. I bought good boots, not expensive handbags. If a crew was short, I pulled on a reflective jacket and worked beside them. Wealth felt safer when no one could see it. Experience had taught me caution. A former boyfriend discovered the company's value and immediately made plans requiring my money and his signature. Friends requested loans, then called me selfish when I refused. Whenever people learned what I had, affection became arithmetic. So I stopped giving people numbers. Then I met Daniel Whitmore. It happened outside a public elementary school during a February storm. Harbor had the snow removal contract, and I arrived before sunrise to check the lot. Daniel, who taught 5th grade there, was shoveling the wheelchair ramp in dress shoes and a wool coat with a torn pocket. "You're making twice the work for yourself," I called. He looked at the pile he had just thrown into the wind. Half of it had blown back over his legs. "I was hoping no professional would witness this," he said. I showed him how to work with the wind instead of against it. We talked until the first bus appeared. He asked why I liked working in the dark, whether I had always lived near the lake, and what book was sitting on my dashboard. He never asked how much I made or whether the truck belonged to me. That felt rare enough to be precious. We started meeting for coffee. Daniel was gentle, funny, and more interested in people than status. He lived in a modest apartment above a bakery and spent weekends tutoring children whose parents could not afford extra help. When he eventually learned that I owned Harbor, he seemed impressed by the work, not curious about the valuation. I told him it was a successful regional company and left it there. He never pushed. 10 months into our relationship, he finally told me about his family. The Whitmores were one of Duluth's old names. Their ancestors had built ships, funded a library wing, and posed for portraits that still hung in the Maritime Museum. "There is nothing more fragile than a family living on its reputation," Daniel told me. I assumed he was making a joke. The first time he took me to Whitmore House, I realized he was not. The stone mansion stood above the lake, impressive from the road and strangely tired up close. Paint had begun peeling beneath the balconies. One gutter leaned away from the roof. Inside, the rooms smelled of furniture polish, cold fireplaces, and something shut up too long. Lydia Whitmore greeted me wearing pearls at 4 in the afternoon. She examined my boots before meeting my eyes. Daniel says you do yard work, she said. I own an outdoor services company. How industrious. Her smile made the compliment sound like a diagnosis. And your people? Are they from Duluth? My grandmother raised me. She passed away several years ago. Daniel's sister, Caroline, tilted her head. So you have no real family nearby. There were a dozen kind answers available to her. She chose none of them. At dinner, Lydia corrected the way I held a wine glass. Caroline asked whether landscaping was seasonal and if I received unemployment in winter. When I said my company handled snow removal, she glanced at my hands as though she had just discovered dirt beneath my nails. Daniel squeezed my knee under the table. I interpreted it as support. Later, I understood it was a request. Please endure this without forcing me to confront them. I could have ended their little investigation in 30 seconds. I could have told them that Harbour cleared the roads leading to their own house, or that I owned the warehouse Lydia passed every time she drove downtown. Instead, I gave short answers and let them believe what they preferred. Part of me was protecting myself. Another part wanted something I had never had. A large family, a permanent table, people who remembered birthdays and argued over the same holiday recipes every year. The Whitmores possessed the appearance of continuity. I mistook that appearance for belonging. When Daniel proposed 18 months later, I said yes before he finished the question. Lydia looked at my small sapphire ring and said, "How sensible." Within a week, she had taken control. The wedding would be at the North Shore Club, where Whitmores had married for generations. She selected everything. When I asked to invite 20 members of my crew, she frowned. "We have limited space, Mara. This is not a company picnic." Daniel asked me to let it go. "The wedding matters more to her than it does to us," he said. "Once it's over, we can live our own life." That became his answer to everything. Let her have the flowers. Ignore Caroline's comments. Do not react. Keep the peace. At each family dinner, I surrendered another inch. Lydia repeated my sentences in more polished language. Caroline introduced me as Daniel's landscaper fiancé. Daniel insisted I had misunderstood their intentions. One evening, driving home along the dark shoreline, I finally said, "Your mother does not respect me." Daniel gripped the steering wheel. "She tests everyone. Do you hear what that sounds like? I hear someone who doesn't know her yet. Give her time. And until then, don't give her a reason to make things worse." The answer settled painfully between us. He was not asking his mother to stop hurting me. He was asking me not to bleed on the carpet. The first open warning came from Caroline. She invited me for coffee under the excuse of discussing bridal shower details. After 10 minutes of false warmth, she began asking about Harbour. How many vehicles did I actually own? Were they financed? Did I rent my house? Had Daniel invested in the company? Because I answered vaguely, she measured my finances backward and left convinced I owned one old truck, a mortgaged house, and a seasonal business. 2 weeks later at Whitmore House, I heard Lydia and Caroline speaking behind the study door. She saw the name and recognized an opportunity. Lydia said, "We have to protect what remains. Daniel won't listen. Then we make her prove she isn't a gold digger." The accusation hurt, but one phrase stayed with me. What remains? I began noticing faded rectangles where furniture once stood, empty velvet inside the silver cabinet, cold rooms kept closed, and repairmen sent away over price. One Saturday, I opened the study by mistake. Missing paintings had left bright rectangles on the dark walls. On the desks had overdue mortgage notices, an electricity disconnection warning, and an auction house brochure for estate jewelry and artwork. I did not touch anything. I did not need to. The Whitmores were nearly broke. Their wealth existed in plaques, portraits, and stories. The mansion was mortgaged. The valuables were being sold quietly. Lydia was not protecting a fortune from me. She was protecting the illusion of one from everyone else. As I backed into the hall, my hand closed around Grandma June's lunchbox key, which I carried on my key ring. Its hard little edge steadied me. For the first time, Lydia's behavior made sense. If she could make me the suspicious outsider, no one would look at the empty spaces on her walls. She needed the town watching my hands so it would not inspect hers. I kept her secret. That decision embarrasses me now. I told myself I was being compassionate, but the truth was simpler. I still hoped she would accept me, even after discovering that the grand family I wanted to join was held together by debt and fear. I still wanted a place inside it. 3 weeks before the wedding, Daniel came to my house carrying a thick envelope. "Mom wants us to sign a prenup," he said without sitting down. "Just a formality." "Us?" He looked toward the window. "Mostly you." The agreement had been prepared by Caroline's attorney. It required me to waive any future claim against Whitmore assets, which was reasonable enough. But buried several pages later was a clause stating that any business interest, real estate, or investment I brought into the marriage would become part of a Whitmore family trust after the wedding. They were not merely protecting what they had, they were attempting to claim what belonged to me, even though they believed that amounted to almost nothing. I placed the agreement on the kitchen table. "Did you read this?" I asked Daniel. He read the clause twice. I watched his expression, waiting for outrage. Instead, he rubbed his forehead. "It's only paper, Mara. We're not going to divorce." "Then why do I have to sign it?" "Because refusing will convince Mom she was right about you. She is asking me to transfer my company to her family. She thinks your company is small. This is just standard language, and that makes it acceptable." His voice softened, which somehow made it worse. "Please, sign it, and this war ends." That was the moment something inside me became still. Daniel loved me, but he had spent his life surviving Lydia by surrendering before she demanded it. Now he expected me to survive her the same way. He did not understand that Harbor was not merely an asset. It was every frozen morning, every rejected loan, every payroll I had covered from my own savings, and every lesson my grandmother had packed into that dented lunchbox. I told him I needed time. The next morning I called my attorney, Simone Park. Months earlier, after first hearing the gold digger accusation, I had asked her to draft a fair agreement protecting Harbor and keeping both parties' premarital property separate. Now I asked her to finish it and prepare my full financial disclosure. Simone valued Harbor, listed my property and investments, and summarized the law. A valid agreement required honest disclosure, independent advice, and time to consider the terms. Lydia's document met none of those standards. I placed Simone's folder beside the Whitmore agreement and waited. Caroline revealed their plan 4 days before the rehearsal dinner. She called to confirm that 58 guests would attend. "All the important families will be there," she said. "They're eager to witness you joining us." She emphasized witness. I understood immediately. Lydia did not intend for me to sign privately. She planned to present the agreement before Duluth's old social circle, 1 day before the wedding, when refusing would appear to confirm every lie she had told about me. Public shame was supposed to force my hand. I considered skipping the dinner. Then I imagined Lydia telling everyone I had fled because the prenup exposed me. For almost 2 years I had allowed the Whitmores to write my role. I would not let them write the ending. On the night of the dinner, I wore a simple navy dress and carried Grandma June's green lunchbox in my truck. Before entering the club, I opened it. Inside were 2 old cleaning cloths, her recipe card for apple cake, and the first handwritten invoice from Harbor Outdoor Services. I touched the faded paper and heard her voice. "What feeds you matters more than what impresses strangers." Then I took my folder and walked inside. The club looked magnificent from a distance. Up close, I noticed silk flowers, worn carpet, and watermarks softened by dim light. Lydia moved among guests in silver satin. Caroline sat near the head table with her phone ready. Daniel was pale. His father, Robert, watched me from the far end of the table. He had always been the quietest Whitmore, a man who seemed to apologize with his eyes for words he lacked the courage to say. The document was hidden beneath Lydia's place setting. She waited until the main course had been cleared. Then she stood and tapped her glass. She spoke about heritage, responsibility, and the sacrifices required to preserve a family legacy. Guests nodded as though attending a lecture. Finally, she removed the agreement and slid it across the white tablecloth toward me. Before Mara becomes a Whitmore, she announced, we have one small matter to settle. She offered me a fountain pen. Sign this and prove you are not here for our money. No one moved. Then Lydia smiled and added, after all, you bring nothing to this family but ambition. Caroline lifted her phone. Daniel whispered, Mara, please. I looked at him. Did you know she would do this tonight? His silence answered for him. I picked up the pen. Lydia's shoulders relaxed. But instead of signing, I opened the agreement and read the trust clause aloud. The guests heard exactly what Lydia wanted. All businesses, investments, and property I owned before marriage would be transferred to her family. Is that correct? I asked. It is standard protection, Lydia replied. Protection for whom? Her smile tightened. For people who have something to lose. I placed the pens above the signature line and let the room lean toward me. Then I set it down. A fair agreement requires both parties to disclose what they own, I said. You have not shown me your disclosure, but I brought mine. I opened Simone's folder. First, I read Harbour's basic figures, 63 vehicles, 114 employees, 9 municipal contracts, and commercial work across 4 counties. Murmurs moved through the room. Then I stated the independent valuation, $21,400,000. Caroline slowly lowered her phone. I listed the 3 buildings I owned without debt, my retirement accounts, and my investment portfolio. I did not exaggerate or gloat. I simply let facts occupy the space where their assumptions had been. Robert's chair scraped sharply against the floor. He half stood, staring at the pages. Unlike the other guests, he knew the balance remaining in the Whitmore accounts. He understood at once that the supposed gold digger was the only financially secure person at the table. Lydia's face lost all color. You said I brought nothing, I told her. Now everyone knows the value of my nothing. I could have exposed the overdue bills and missing paintings. For a moment I saw fear in Lydia's eyes and realized she expected me to do it. Humiliating her would have been easy. I chose not to. Your financial situation is your private business, I said. I will not discuss it here. I wish you had offered me the same dignity. That sentence struck harder than any number. I placed my own agreement on the table. This version protects both Daniel and me. Neither person takes what the other built. Both disclose the truth, both receive independent advice, and both sign freely. I was prepared to offer that. Then I stood. But I will not marry into a performance where silence is the admission price. I turned to Daniel. My hands were steady, though my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I love you, but tonight you knew I was being brought here to be shamed, and you asked me to cooperate. So this is your choice. We can cancel tomorrow's wedding and meet next Friday at the county courthouse with 2 witnesses and no family theater. Before then, we attend counseling, sign a fair agreement, and tell each other the complete truth. Or we end here. I will not spend my marriage begging you to defend me. Lydia reached for his arm. Daniel, sit down. For several seconds, he stared at the table. I could see 36 years of obedience fighting with the man I had met in the snow. Then he stood and moved to my side. I knew about tonight, he said, his voice unsteady. I told myself I was preventing a worse fight. I was really asking Mara to take the blow for me. He looked at his mother. I'm done calling your fear tradition. Lydia's expression cracked. You have no idea what it costs to preserve this family. Robert answered before Daniel could. It has already cost us our son's respect. It was the first time I had heard him oppose her. I gathered both agreements and walked out. Daniel followed, but I did not take his hand until we reached the parking lot. Choosing me in one dramatic moment did not erase 2 years of silence, and I told him so. I know, he said. Let me earn back what I gave away. We cancelled the wedding the next morning. We did not marry the following Friday. That would have been satisfying but dishonest. Daniel moved into a hotel while we attended counseling. He apologized to my crew, disclosed his savings and debt, and heard every number I had hidden. I admitted that my secrecy had turned relationships into tests no one knew they were taking. Trust, we learned, could not grow while either of us was performing poverty, peace, or perfection. 6 weeks later, we married at the county courthouse. I wore the navy dress from the rehearsal dinner. 2 harbor supervisors served as witnesses. Robert came alone and stood at the back. Afterward, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph of Grandma June cleaning the lobby of the old Whitmore shipping office nearly 30 years earlier. Robert had found it in a box being prepared for auction. "Your grandmother worked harder for our name than most people who inherited it," he said. "We were the ones marrying up." Lydia did not attend. I no longer needed her absence to mean anything. Whitmore House was sold that autumn. Robert paid the remaining debts and moved into a small apartment near the lake. Caroline stopped speaking to us for almost a year. Lydia retained her pearls, several portraits, and the family name she had sacrificed so much to defend. Harbor expanded into Wisconsin the following winter. Daniel remained a teacher. He also learned that supporting me did not mean agreeing quietly in private. Sometimes it meant speaking while the room was still listening. As for me, I stopped using modesty as a disguise. I did not buy a mansion or replace my truck immediately, but I stopped pretending that my success was something dangerous. I framed Harbor's first invoice beside Grandma June's photograph and hung both in my office where every visitor could see them. Her green lunchbox sits beneath them for years. I believed hiding my worth protected me from people who wanted to use it. Instead, it sometimes attracted people who felt free to mistreat me because they thought I had no power. Lydia's cruelty taught me something my grandmother had tried to explain long before I was ready to hear it. What feeds your life matters more than what impresses strangers, but you should never be ashamed to name what you built. That night at the club, Lydia placed a price on my place at her table. I finally understood that belonging purchased with silence is not belonging at all. So I put down her pen, and for the first time, I signed my own name without making it smaller.